Sahita and Keval Kumbhaka. As we have already seen in the discussion about the evolution of the concept of pranayam, in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the pranayam essentially represents the process of bringing the breathing cycle to a standstill. Patanjali defines the pranayam in his Yoga Sutras as follows: Tasmin sati shwasa prashwasayogativitshida pranyama, which literally means pranayam is the stoppage of the inspiratory and expiratory cyclic movement of the breath which follows when that asana has been secured. Herein it is important to notice that some authorities interpret the term gativicheda as the change in the regular or the normal pattern of breathing and, therefore, feel that according to Patanjali, the pranayam means the control over the normal pattern of breathing leading ultimately to its total and spontaneous silencing. On the other hand, some others interpret it as the total and deliberate pause in the movement of the breath and, therefore, equate it with the state of kumbhaka. In the next sutra on pranayam, Patanjali says Bahyabhya enterastambhavritadesh kalasankhya paridrishto dirgha sukshma, which means the breathing movement can come to a standstill in three ways: Bahya, after the breath has moved out; Abhyantara, after the breath has moved in; and Stambha, either way in between, when the breath stops spontaneously after the long-term practice of earlier two types, and when examined in the context of Desha, Kala, Sankhya. This stoppage could be described as Dirgha, deep and prolonged, and Sukshma, with least efforts. In the next sutra Patanjali says Bahyabhyantar Vishakshapi Chaturtha, which means, having reached the extremes of Dirgha and Sukshma qualities, the breathing movement becomes silent, so much so that the fourth type is beyond the description of being recognized as Bahya or Abhyantara, variety of pranayam. It all means that when the student practices Bahya and Abhyantara pranayam for a prolonged period, there comes a stage when the respiration is under control and the breathing activity ceases for a short while on its own. But still this is not under sufficient control for this spontaneous cessation of breath to last very long, and, therefore, it requires repeated practice of Bahya and Abhyantara vritti pranayam. Ultimately, out of this practice one reaches the stage where the full mastery is achieved and the spontaneous cessation now lasts for as long as one wishes and does not require the practice of Bahya or Abhyantara pranayam just prior to it anymore. This is the fourth variety of pranayam. In his Yoga Sutras, Patanjali does not use the words Puraka, Rechka or Kumbhaka, but in the later period many of the commentaries on these Yoga Sutras use these words, so much so that pranayam being described in the terms of deliberate stoppage of breath, the term Kumbhaka became synonymous with it. They describe the Bahya and Abhyantavritti pranayam where the breath is stopped deliberately involving some efforts as Sahita Kumbhaka, the state of Stambhavritti pranayam where the occasional spontaneous cessation of breath occurs, mixed with the deliberate stoppage of breath as Mishrita Kevala Kumbhaka, and the state of Chaturtha pranayam where the breathing cycle becomes completely silent, totally spontaneously without any efforts whatsoever, as Kevala Kumbhaka. Even the Hat Pradipika makes it very clear. When it says when pranayam is done with Rechka and Puraka it is called Sahita Kumbhaka, and when the breath gets retained spontaneously without preceding inhalation or exhalation and with ease, it is called Keval Kumbhaka, and further advocates that one should continue practicing the Sahita variety until one attains Keval Kumbhaka. Regarding this Keval Kumbhaka, while commenting on the relevant Yoga Sutras, Swami Kuvalayananda has said that one should perform many rounds of Sahita Kumbhaka daily, over a fairly long period of time, trying to maintain the Kumbhaka phase progressively for a longer time and involving progressively lesser physical efforts, until the stage is reached when the breath ceases spontaneously, which is a stage of Kevala Kumbhaka. Thus, from the technical point of view, we find that the pranayam has been treated at two different levels. First one involves deliberate stoppage of breath for a specific period of time, incorporating either the phase of the inner retention, Abhyantara, or the outer retention, Bahya, of breath. The second one, on the other hand, involves the spontaneous cessation of the breath without any immediate preceding efforts. This occurs as a result of long-term practice of Sahita Kumbhaka, but as observed in actual practice it can occur even through the long-term practice of simple Puraka and Rechka without the phase of intervening Kumbhaka. This slows down the breathing cycle itself, ultimately bringing it to a complete standstill.